Some understandings needed now that could not be gained then. Then I felt that her anger was out of proportion to the situation at hand, and that she was even mad at spirits for things she felt they were going to do, but had not done yet. I had anger at her for the way she felt here, and I wanted her to hold these feelings back. Then later, when she did not respond to me by opening to receive my love, I did not understand why. I now know that the will cannot hold some things back without having everything affected. I have understanding on the will now that I had not had then. At that time, I still did not know whether the will was causal or simply responsive. At that time, I had an unconscious image of myself that said I had to be perfect from the beginning, and perfect meant that I had to know everything already. This image was fed to me by my guilt and fears about whether I was really supposed to be God or not. I have since come to peace with my role as God and realized that God also has processes, or I would not be an evolving God, and that this evolution has a perfection to it that is an evolving perfection. The experience I've had since then has allowed me to understand the Mother in ways I did not understand her then. I have these understandings to give you now if you would like to have them. I have learned what I am sharing with you now by understanding my own reflection, and by healing the results of my own denials as they have become ready to heal. I have gotten these understandings by understanding the reflection of the manifested spirits had to give. Each spirit manifests a part of me. None of the manifested spirits have total understanding of me, but each has a part of the picture. Being able to see all the parts, I have been able to learn from my own reflection. I am now sure that I have had the understandings that will bring the healing needed, because I have finally been able to assimilate all the pieces in a way that both makes sense and feels right. I have desired to help the manifested spirits to now enlarge the picture they are holding as much as possible. Many of the spirits have old pictures they have held since original cause. Guilt held the will back from expressing herself because it was not understood why this expression was necessary. With the outward flow shut down, the will became overloaded. Once the receptive centers were full, no more could be taken in. Emotional expression allows expansion in the capacity to receive. The problem with not allowing the will to move has been that even the spirits who had will presence reached a point where they could not receive anything more from me. At this point, most spirits looked away from me, and in doing so have received no new information. In looking away from me, frozen images of what God is have remained, and have not been able to move because the will has not moved. These images are not complete enough to give the spirits what they need to evolve. At first, I thought that time would help. I thought that time would allow the emotions to calm down, and then more understandings could be given. I have found this is not true. If anything, time has layered the conditioning in even more deeply. I now know that the conditioning in the will must move, or there is no possibility of new understandings penetrating the parts of the will that are already filled with as much as can be held. Moving what the will has been holding, so it is open to something new, is a thing that has been given the least acceptance on earth, and is the very thing that most needs to happen. Fear and lack of understanding is part of the reason that this clearance has not been allowed, but there is also intent on earth to get rid of the will. Lack of understanding is the ignorance which has bred the fear. Fear has not been considered a pleasant emotion, and has been labeled a breach of faith in God. Fear has been denied in so many ways that it is impossible to describe them all, but I will give a few. There is a hidden fear in most of the actions of people on earth, but you are going to have to feel when it is fear and when it is intent to get rid of the will instead. The eating habits of many people who have enough food are to help them avoid fear. When laws are made to do something about a problem, fear or powerlessness is often involved. Most behavior that is meant to show lack of fear is an act to draw attention away from fear that is hidden but nonetheless present. Anger is often used to hide fear that lies underneath it. There are other emotions that are hidden in actions also, so you are really going to have to feel this to know what I mean. The will has received this avoidance and denial, and has interpreted it as an unlovingness toward the will. The will has not felt accepted, and no wonder. Guilt then took over the will, because the will feared it was somehow at fault for having feelings the spirits did not want to accept. When the will could no longer bear to hold a feeling, it was not allowed to move. It fragmented. Guilt in the will especially in the fragments that are almost consumed by it, is what draws the punishment that the will fears if it tries to move what it has been holding. Recognizing the presence of guilt, including guilt that you have guilt, and deciding whether you want to allow it to have power over you anymore is the first step here. If you have desire for guilt to go, you need to let your will know that you now have acceptance for moving the emotions that guilt has been suppressing. You may have attacks of body pains, especially in your upper back, neck, or head, after expressing emotions that you have felt guilty about having. Understandings on guilt, combined with the acceptance of the emotions that guilt has had the power to suppress, will move guilt out of you. You cannot win an argument with guilt, but you can give yourself more acceptance so that guilt no longer remains an unseen dictator. Overthrowing this dictatorship is what you must do with guilt. Part of my process has been to face the reflection of my own guilt, which said to me that if I really fit to be God, I should not need process. I should already know, and if I didn't already know, then I had no business emerging a creation which I could not guide properly. Guilt will always tell you you should be doing better than you already are. I had enough understanding to bring forth the creation, or it would not have happened. There was no way to know in advance of the experience what the experience had to teach us. Just as I had learned enough to manifest the creation when the creation came forth, I have now learned enough to heal the imbalance manifested then. I still have to learn what the manifesting of this healing has to teach me. I will keep you informed if you are open to receive me. You have to understand that you will never get ahead of me because the Godhead vibrates faster than anything else. Full self-acceptance has been lacking in my creation, and coming into full self-acceptance includes accepting your point of manifestation. All the spirits manifested after I had existence for a long time, because they had a desire to learn from me and to let me go first so they could learn from me. Each spirit manifested in the place that was right for it, and each spirit manifested in response to the vibration in me that called it forth. If you found a group around you, you are group-oriented. If not, you are individually oriented. Both orientations are fine. You have to accept yourself and your right place, or you cannot evolve as you need to. Understanding is that the progression in which you manifested is the progression in which you needed to manifest, and this progression gave you a relationship to me that is right for you, and allows you to receive from me in ways that feel best to you. Getting closer to me than is comfortable, or farther away from me than is comfortable, does not allow you to receive me in the ways that you need to receive me. I have gone through a long process with spirits who have not wanted to accept their emergence. What I have been facing here has been a reflection of my own guilt. I had to face the guilt I had over feeling responsible for everything, and the blame I felt towards others when I did not want to have to feel that I was responsible for everything. You are going to have to face the same things in yourself. I have originated everything, and so I have caused all of it. This was the source of guilt's power to tell me that everything was my responsibility. Guilt gave me the feeling that blame was not right, and I tried to avoid blaming for a long time. I later found out I had been blaming in a gapped state. By gapped state, I mean that I was not aware of my blame because I felt justified in doing what I was doing. Guilt had been getting me to bend over backwards for everyone much more than I really wanted to, and was making me feel like I was not a loving God if I didn't want to do this. I was suppressing my anger here because I feared that guilt was right, and that everything I was having to do needed to be done. One of the judgments here was, it is not loving to blame others. I have only myself to blame. When my anger and blame got loose, it went out into a state of denial and hit the ones I thought should take more responsibility for themselves. These spirits then came to me claiming they had been victimized by demons who did not have light or love. I had to realize later how this had happened. I had a desire for this to happen to them, but I had not allowed this desire into my conscious mind because I had judged against it so heavily. When I first realized this desire was present, I blamed the mother for having it, and still did not accept that it felt it myself. I thought she had evil or unloving intent. Understanding here is that all the spirits do have to take responsibility for themselves. I have originated everything. This is true, and the spirits have followed my lead. The spirits have had their own free will from the beginning, however, and each has responded to the vibration within me that have attracted them. I have responsibility for having originated the vibrations, and the spirits have responsibility for being drawn to particular vibrations in me. I have responsibility for my lost will that has not known how to move through things when I would not give acceptance to its process, and the spirits have responsibility for their lost will in the same manner. Spirit must open to receive will now, and lost will must be willing to open and receive spirit. Will essence that does not want to open to my light now will go outside of me along with the spirit essence that does not want to open and receive will now. Lost will must be allowed to get the message, though, that it can heal this time. I had no idea that it would take so long to get the lost will to open to me once I understood how it had gotten lost. I had to try everything to understand how to get it to open once it had closed. I have intent to let you know that lost will is not to be sent outside of me just because Spirit does not want to try very hard to get it. Intent makes a difference here. Intent is what I found had made the difference originally. Those who had intent to deny the will did not feel the same to me as those who did not understand the will. At times the mother feared that the rejection she was receiving was all the same, and at other times she was able to realize that some had intent to destroy her. The mother has to heal now, and she has to know that she is accepted for how she is, and not just for how others would like her to be. She has many facets that have been personified on earth, and most of them have not been very well liked. This is because fear of the mother has been denied in favor of deriding her to avoid having to face the fear. The only images of the mother that have received the pretense of acceptance are images such as the Virgin Mary. The mother does not like any of the mother images very well because they have not given a true picture of the fullness of her nature any more than have the popular images of me. People have not seen sexuality, rage, or anything else that has been judged negative as a part of God. The judgments against these aspects have made these aspects appear to prove the judgments against them. In the beginning, the angels felt that they were most favored children, largely because they were the most like me. Other spirits resented the angels for this, and yet wanted to be favored themselves. What is held in the lost will around this must also move now. So please allow any feelings you may have in response to any of the spirits as they come forward in the story. It may be that you will feel guilt that you may or may not have had a white light beginning. It may be that you will feel desire to deny the existence of angels altogether. You may feel anger, jealousy, rage, or hatred toward the white light spirits, or even fear that you are unworthy compared to the white light spirits. You may have guilt and feelings of unworthiness for having the feelings you have. You may hate me for not making everyone the same. You may have blamed me for a long time for having given more light to some spirits than to others. You may feel that you have persecuted in past lives and believed I was not there for you the way that I was there for others. No matter what you feel, you need to allow the emotions to move and release the judgments you have held around them. I had an ecstasy in the beginning, and then fear when I realized I was attached to feeling good. I had hard times in the beginning with the mother, but had reached joy later with her. Next, I had manifested a creation that had given me joy in the beginning, and I had felt that it was not wrong to allow all the essence that wanted to share in this experience with me to come forward and manifest their companionship. Rather quickly, what began as joyful romp through the heavens with friends became for me hard times. Now it was not just the mother who had complaints. I had many complaining spirits who continually wanted to insist that their lack of enjoyment was our fault. I had become exasperated with the spirits who had been trying to pin me down with endless questions that all seemed to begin with some form of "what if?" At that time, I had guilt holding me present with them more than I had wanted to be. Today I would say to them, either you do not have intent to embrace life, or you need to go to the fear underneath the questions and understand your fear. As I turned to help the angels, the mother helped me to help myself. When I went into the yard and found that some of my dearest little angel friends had become confused by Lucifer, even though Heart had been present with them, I felt that it was not possible to give either the spirits in the classroom or in the yard the understanding they needed and have them know it was true understanding. I felt overwhelmed, and I hated Lucifer doing this to them. I had hoped that they could all remain near me and never have to learn anything the hard way by going down difficult and painful paths. I knew that Lucifer was wrong, but I could not prove this to them because they did not understand how I knew this. Even though I felt Lucifer was not right, it seemed I could not stop him. I had the grief of a parent who realizes he is not going to be able to save his children from the very troubles he wanted to help them avoid. I then gave a look outward into the heavens, and I saw that I had trouble there also. I felt that I must go forth to them again in an orderly progression and see what help I could bring. The mother did not like it. She had been doing her best to help me with the children, and she felt that she had already been waiting a long time to have some time with me. She wanted to have some attention from me. She did not like it that having children seemed to mean that she did not get to have time with me anymore. She begged me to take her out among the stars and play with her like we used to before the spirits emerged. "How can we do that when we have so many spirits that need us right now?" I asked her. "If they needed us, they would have acceptance for us. Guilt makes you stay with them," she replied. I had to admit that she was right. Guilt was making me stay with the spirits when I would have liked to have a romp. Guilt had told me that I would be ignoring their needs if I gave in to my desires. If you have to decide between the needs of the mother and the needs of the children, whose needs are you going to meet? The mother asked me now. I told the mother that I was going to have to meet the needs of the children first. "If we don't meet our needs, we'll have nothing with which to meet their needs," the mother snapped at me. I turned on her and made her feel foolish for thinking she could be needing sex when there were so many children already. "What if we have more?" I screamed at her. "You think I want more?" she screamed back. As I had said earlier, the mother was holding back full expression of her rage. She had the feeling that it was not right to give so much attention to the spirits and so little to her. She felt like her contribution was overlooked and unappreciated. She felt like it was not right to try to give understanding over and over to spirits who had no will in which to anchor them. She had rage over all of this, but she was afraid to let it move. When she lost control and gave me a little outburst, I made her feel that I wanted her to cool down quickly and not allow the rage to gain momentum. She was afraid that I would not allow her to rage, and she was afraid that I would reject her for having this rage. She felt guilt closing over her the moment she cooled her rage. Guilt told her it was not loving to have these feelings, and that she was not the mother she should be if she had so little interest in mothering the spirits. Guilt told her it was wrong to feel that her needs should come first, especially if she wanted to put sexual needs ahead of the children's needs. The mother tried to put aside her feelings as I had asked her to, and gave her loving presence to go to the spirits. Lost will got her denied feelings. The mother was feeling ill from holding back emotions, and guilt told her she had to ignore those feelings in favor of her parental role. I told her we would make love later when we had a harmonious background in which to do it. The mother did not believe she could last that long, especially holding back the way she was. I told her then that if she would just help me look at the Godhead spirits, we would take a little break together before we went to the other manifested spirits. The mother looked at me and said, "No, God must first be in his right place, and then the spirits can get the help they need." Lost will holds all the feelings the mother had to overcome in herself to be able to confront me with such certainty. She had plenty of guilt and fear that she was not right, but she also had a strong feeling that she was right. She pulled me to her and asked me to touch her. I touched what I could then, but I did not touch the mother enough to fully realize how bad she was feeling. Lost will is still holding places I did not touch then, but I gave the mother as much light as I could. I had not realized how slow my vibration had been getting until I felt the exhilaration of joining with the mother in the feeling of freedom. We had not had for a long time. We shot upwards together and had a flurry of small explosions. No spirits emerged that we saw, much to our great relief. There was such a great need for light in the Godhead that it was not wrong of us to have done this, even though lost will has held the belief that it was wrong ever since then. We also both had some guilt that we had not included Heart and Father of Manifestation. It was much later, when I understood that the Godhead lost so much light from the holding back that guilt had been able to get us to do, that the spirits could not have handled the tremendous and sudden increase in the light that would have taken place if the four of us had all made love at once. Even though I had plenty of uncertainty toward the Father of Manifestation, I also had feelings of guilt and fear whenever he was left out, because something in me knew, even then, that no matter how I was having to struggle to accept it, Heart was right in saying that he was my brother. The mother always felt fear and guilt when we made love. Either someone was left out and she felt fear and guilt about that, or everyone was included, and she felt fear and guilt about that. Either we emerged children, and she was afraid and guilty that there were too many or not right somehow, or we didn't emerge children, and she had fear and guilt that she was holding them back. She always had fear that I had expectations of her, and she could not fulfill, and guilt made her feel that she had to turn me loose to have another if she was not adequate. She hated the feeling that she might have to let me go, and she hated the feeling she could not be with me because we were having too many children. She felt guilty that she had these feelings, and then she felt guilty that when we were together, she was such a mess, and that I had to give her a lot of light and help because her emotions were giving her no peace. She had feelings that guilt and I and everyone else were right, and that denying her feelings was the only way she was going to be able to stand herself. "No wonder no one likes me," she would say sometimes. "I can barely stand myself." I loved her, but sometimes I shared her feelings toward herself, and sometimes I had great sympathy for her. This time I had sympathy for her, and she found peace in my arms for a little while. She feared that it was somehow a stolen peace, but nonetheless, she wished for it at last, and she wished for us not to have to go back to the problems we had left, or if we did, that they would somehow all be fixed. She told me that she did not like us having the power to create if we couldn't control how it was going to turn out. Lost Will got the emotions of rage and fear around the powerlessness we were actually feeling here. We did not feel like expressing these feelings because we did not know how to handle them, and we also felt that we could not go on without being able to take a break and escape from our feelings in order to rest. We did allow ourselves to rest for a little while, and the Father of Manifestation joined us. He had felt feelings of being left out at first, but he also had felt that we could not all be together at once, given the situation at hand. When he joined us, it increased our light and our presence even more. He told us that our orgasms had increased the light the spirits were receiving, and that it had helped some of them, but others had seemed to get worse and acted as though they were being hurt by it. The mother suggests that not all spirits are spirits of the light. This made the mother feel even more angry, but she expressed anger. Her feeling was that all spirits had been born of orgasm, and that if they didn't know how they got there, it was time they found out. So she sooner said this than something seemed to stab her right from within, giving her the feeling that her statement was not right. She suddenly felt that we had some spirits that did not like orgasm and had not come forth as a result of orgasm. "I don't know how it could be possible," she said out loud, once she realized the Father of Manifestation and I were feeling her. She felt like she needed to tell us something now, and that she had been feeling holding back because she did not understand it. She told us she had felt there had not been an opportunity before, but the feeling she had just now made her feel like she needed to bring this forward now. Sometimes, she said, when I have gone out into the darkness to open space, I have felt things I did not like. If you have not come to me immediately, I have felt like I was being bitten or ripped at. It hurts me and has made me feel afraid to go into the darkness and be alone until you light up the space I have opened. I want you to go right with me and not leave any gap at all. At first, I was not going to mention it because I don't want to complain about everything, but now I'm afraid that we might have something manifesting that likes darkness, and I don't want to find it when I go out there, and I don't want it to manifest through me. The Father of Manifestation and I both told her that we had never felt or seen anything like she was describing now. The mother answered that these things were never there when our light was. "Well, they're like monsters," she said. "They're terrible things, and I'm afraid they have intent to hurt me. I have an utter revulsion towards them." We had to take the mother at her word because we had not experienced this, but she had had such a strong feeling about it that it did not seem that she could have made it up. Lost Will got that fear, that she was just imagining things in response to the fear that she had already had. Lost Will also got the fear that maybe it was us she was receiving here, and she did not know how to receive us in a way that would not bring her pain. All the hapless ones that have met fates in the darkness that others never see or even really believe have personified the Lost Will here. Our response to the mother at the time was to say that whatever was going on, we needed to find out about it. We all agreed that we would begin by taking another look at all the orders of spirits, one by one. I called a heart and asked them to help us now by asking all the spirits to go back to their place of emergence so that we could see how they had emerged and feel whether it seemed to be the right place or not. We followed heart now in progressing through the orders of spirits. I wanted to recover some order and regain some harmony in creation, so that we could enjoy it the way heart and eye had envisioned we would enjoy it. Early attempts to help the Ancient Ones. We started with the Ancient Ones. We found that they had begun fighting among themselves about things such as who had the most power, who had emerged first, and who was the oldest. The Ancient Ones had also been fighting about where the line was really drawn between God and the manifested spirits, if indeed they were not God. Now I have acceptance for these feelings, and I want them to be expressed and resolved. Then I did not like it because it looked to me like the Ancient Ones still wanted to tell me that they didn't like the job I was doing, and that they wanted to find a way to replace me with themselves. I still do not want the Ancient Ones to do things in my place, but I have acceptance now for their feeling as part of their process of realizing that they did manifest out of me. The spirits involved here now realize there is a gap in speed of vibration between us. The Ancient Ones are the closest to me in speed, but they are not as fast as I am, and they are going to have to accept this now and stop trying to slow me down by insisting that I must listen to them. The Ancient Ones have many guilt fragments on earth that have been holding the guilt they denied having about confronting me the way they did. The Ancient Ones had decided among themselves that Heart and the Father of Manifestation both needed mates, and that these mates should come from their order, and would rightfully be God even if the rest of the order was not. The arguments about who was oldest or most powerful had begun around the issue of who would be the mates of Heart and Body. The oldest ones were claiming to be female, and claiming that they were the manifest mates for Heart and Body. The youngest one claimed that it was not fair to decide that the first emergence was the closest to God, because they had all become conscious within the same time, and that emerging the way that they had was because an orderly progression made sense. Actually, he said, emerging last just makes me the most polite, because I was willing to let everyone else go first. I gave the Ancient Ones my views then, including my opinion that oldest was not necessarily most godlike. I told them that if Heart and Body were going to have mates, they would want to have free choice in the matter. Lost Will got the mother's fear then, that she was only with me because she had manifest right there and had given me no choice. Guilt also started telling her then that no matter how much she might think we loved one another now, it had never been tested, and it was only right for her to allow me to try others if I wanted to. The Ancient Ones have lost will that has acted out their insistence that marriage is an arrangement that should be based on position and consideration of power. Their lost will set out to try and prove them correct here because they were afraid to insist on this view directly to my face. The Ancient Ones always took in my views, and then set about trying to prove me wrong whenever they did not feel in agreement with me. I did not think that there had any serious threats to their order present in these squabbles, and so I told them they were going to have to go through whatever they were going to have to go through to learn whatever they needed to learn. I told them they were making a game of their fighting, and that I liked that because they could learn and have fun at the same time. You have made a game of everything I have seen you do so far, I told them. Why not go forth and teach the spirits to play games? I had fun in mind here, since the Ancient Ones had emerged to have fun and celebrate the joy of existing in creation. The Ancient Ones received me as best they could, but they were not ready to let me settle their arguments by giving me a speech. They have lost will that has been acting out misunderstandings because it never worked through the feelings that would have allowed the understanding. The Ancient Ones, at that time, largely tried to put aside some of their own feelings in favor of bringing playfulness and joy to others, no matter how they may actually have felt in themselves. Some lost will here believes that making a game of their feelings will solve the problems without having to go through the real fighting or real bad feelings. Playing games has been both a strength and a weakness of the Ancient Ones, and in some cases the lost will has revealed some hidden intent that did not feel loving. The Ancient Ones need to let their real, angry, fighting, competitive feelings move now, so that they can evolve to the true joy they seek, but which has always eluded them because they cannot successfully ignore what does not feel joyful to them. Giving help to the archangels. The great archangels were next. They had Lucifer in their midst, claiming he was one of them. The great archangels seemed to have grown in light and power since they emerged. I saw then that the great archangels belonged to Heart. They loved him and had taken him in and learned from him. Light poured forth from them, and love was in their hearts. Heart was proud of them. The great archangels had one great problem. They did not feel that Lucifer was one of them. Lucifer never agreed with them, and yet he would not admit that he was different from them. He gives us trouble no matter what we try to do with him, the great archangel said. He was even told us that he is really God, they added. I felt that I had to confront Lucifer, and when I did, he denied everything the archangels had said. He claimed that they did not like him because he was greater than they were, and that they would not admit that he was meant to be their leader. They won't allow themselves to be led, he said. But heart leads them, I replied. Heart does not lead them, Lucifer sneered. Heart stands around and shines like he is a fountain or something. He doesn't lead them. He lets them find their own way. I had to think then of what had happened to so many of the angels, even though Heart had been present shining love upon them. I feared that Lucifer had some validity to his statement, even though it did not feel good to me. The mother intervened then, and said it was not Lucifer who was right. She said the problem was that the angels had not accepted enough will to feel that Heart and Lucifer were not the same. If they cannot understand that Heart is love, and Lucifer is not, they will have to learn by seeing what happens to them if they follow Lucifer. Sometimes she startled me with both her certainty and her wisdom. The mother had this strength and certainty in her rage, and the minute she said these things, she would become afraid inside that she might be wrong. She would feel guilty for having been so positive in ways that guilt told her were not nice. She wondered if she was a loving mother or not to feel so angry at so many of the spirits. Lucifer heard the mother and began to discredit her statements. He told her it was not right to put feelings of some sort of pedestal above reason. He told her that feelings were not all there was, even though she might think so. The innuendo he threw her was that she was so self-centered that she couldn't value anything else. He also told her that any other spirits had rejected her presence because they did not like having to feel what she had to offer. "When have you ever been without fear?" he asked her. Fear holds everything back and does not allow anything to go forward without unpleasantness. The mother shrank from Lucifer because now she was not sure who was right. She felt a chilling and sickening fear. Lucifer pointed at her. "See, you're afraid right now. Even the truth frightens you. You cannot even stand the truth." Guilt told her she could not oppose Lucifer because she could not be sure he was wrong. The mother looked to the Father of Manifestation to see how he felt. The Father of Manifestation had felt Lucifer here and now indicated that Lucifer was not a great archangel, but was one of them. The Father of Manifestation had begun referring to the spirits that did not feel good to him as them. Lucifer attacked him next, saying that form was a lot of the problem we were having with creation. All these different forms are giving rise to feelings that are not allowing the spirits to get along with one another, Lucifer said. And then he went even further in his next statement. "You cannot blame me for the problems you are having in creation. Form and feelings are the problem. Without them, you would have nothing amiss." Then Lucifer pointed to the Father of Manifestation and said, "He is the real cause of the problem. Until he came along, the mother knew she had to listen to you. Lucifer meant me, and the innuendo he gave me was that I was not a man anymore because of what my woman was doing. If others think I am more fit to be God than you are because I have a better understanding to give, I cannot help that," Lucifer continued. "But I have not said it myself. The innuendo he gave this time was one of, I don't have to say it. We denied a lot of feelings right there because we did not want to let Lucifer know how he had made us feel. We had a fear that he would only feel more powerful if he saw that. Lost will got a lot here, but rather than list it, I would rather let you see how it is later going to manifest. We all had fear that Lucifer was telling us something that we could not ignore, but we wanted to get together on it later when he was not around. Then we acted impatient with him and let him know that he was dismissed. We told the great archangels that we did not think Lucifer really was one of them, and that they should ignore him, and that when we discovered that his right place was, we would put him in it. We told Lucifer that he was not to force his company on any spirits that did not want him around. Lucifer got us to deny our feelings in front of him, which made him feel that he was more powerful than we were, and yet it was not wrong that we did this. We had this fear also, otherwise why would we have denied our feelings? I now know that it was because we were denying these feelings in ourselves already, that Lucifer was even able to reflect them in us in that way. Already within ourselves, part of us felt Lucifer was wrong, and yet in part of ourselves, we feared that what Lucifer was saying was right. Since we had not moved these feelings in ourselves, we could not move them in front of him. I had to learn this, though. I did not know it then. I had to learn this by seeing the mother later go ahead and try to move her feelings in front of Lucifer, and see that he had no acceptance at all for her. I have the tortures of Lucifer to bring forward in another book because he tortured the mother for a long time, empowered by her fear and guilt that she was responsible for all that was wrong in creation, including having called form into being. Then the mother had nightmare visions of how Lucifer wanted to treat her that made her almost unable to look at him. We went on to the lesser archangels and found more or less the same thing. They had learned much from heart, and they also had some spirits hanging around that did not seem to belong in their order. There were only a few of them, but there was a distinct feeling to them that this was not the same as lesser archangels. The lesser archangels did not like them, but were trying hard not to show it. Guilt had been telling them that it was not loving to dislike others, because I had told Lucifer to leave the great archangels alone. The lesser archangels were hoping that I would also solve their problems for them by telling these spirits that did not fit in to go away. The lesser archangels had been letting these spirits hang around because these spirits had been claiming they had no place else to go. The lesser archangels did not want them to be homeless, but they hoped we would take them and find them another home. At first it did not seem it would be very hard to find these spirits another place, because we had not looked at very many orders of spirits yet. Surely we would find them a home someplace or make them one. The lesser archangels were greatly relieved. The lesser archangels asked us some questions that heart had not answered for them. They wanted to know if form was important or not. I told them they had to see what form a thing took to know what it was. I was wrong, and this needs to move now. I did not realize that I was trying to give form more importance in the balance of things than it really has, because I was afraid Lucifer had spoken my secret feelings toward form. Giving form was only one of the powers of the Father manifestation, and even he did not feel that form needed to have that much importance given to it. He felt that I was patronizing him, and yet he wanted my acceptance, and he wanted harmony between us, so he did not contradict me. There has been a form and essence confusion in creation that needs to move now. Just because something has the right form does not mean that it is what it appears to be. Many spirits get led like lambs to slaughter by their misunderstanding. For a long time I have had great grief and guilt over what went into the lost will here, because it has not moved in all this time. Instead, many people have blamed themselves for not being loving enough instead of being able to realize that they were being trapped by forms that had no acceptance for their love. The lesser archangels were more childlike than any spirits who had emerged so far, and it was particularly painful for me to watch them suffer with this misunderstanding because of their childlike playfulness and innocence. The form and essence confusion also gave the lost will more than we realized here from having made the judgment that it was not loving to treat others in ways that you yourself would not like to be treated. The form of how others were treated became more important than the essence of it. Guilt also has caused spirits to overlook how they are being treated in favor of how they treat others. This guilt began in the lesser archangels because they did not want to make any spirits homeless just because they did not like having them around. The form and essence confusion I gave them then made it even harder for the lesser archangels to know how to proceed. This misunderstanding has had its effect on all the spirits also. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you has been fulfilled more often in form than it has in essence. Most people do not even allow themselves to notice a difference here. Most people think that if they have an understanding, others should take on the same form of implementing it than they have. As an example here, how often, when you have a desire to have something, do you give it to someone else as a gift rather than giving the other person what they would really like to have? Guilt has further complicated this by telling people it is unloving to give honest feedback if it means saying they like the gesture, but do not like what they have been given. There has been a lot of fear that not loving what someone has done means that you don't love the person. Rather than feel this way, most people have tried to overlook the form, the gift for example, and appreciate the essence as a loving gesture. Form and essence have to align for love to manifest. If you deny one, the other cannot evolve. At that time, I had a long way to go to understand what I have just said, and I did not even know that I did not already understand it. I now know that form has its right place along with everything else. but I had to deny it to learn what happens when it is not aligned with essence. I have understanding to give on form that has not yet been given before, but it will not be given until the last book in this series, because it is not right to bring it forward now. I have to tell you what form has gone through first so that you will be ready to understand form for what it is. The lesser archangels are not wrong to have lost will on earth now, because they needed to learn a lesson about form also. But they need to allow the misunderstanding to heal now. The lesser archangels also need to know that it was their own lost will that they did not want hanging around them then, and it was their own lost will that they were afraid they made homeless so long ago. They need to let all their feelings move on this, and at the same time release their guilt by understanding that it was not wrong to make this lost will go away from them then. This lost will could not align with the lesser archangels then, and needed to have the experience it had to learn what it needed to learn. This statement is not meant to imply that all the emotional pain suffered in the experience is to be cleared by simply telling it what the understanding is. The emotions must be allowed to move until they are ready to accept the understanding without having to pressure in any way to be rid of the pain before the emotions are ready to let go of the pain. Deep conditioning needs repeated emotional release on the same issue. Recovering lost will means even more emotional release than that, because lost will essence returning to you has to go through whatever process it has to go through to catch up with the understanding the rest of you has been getting while it was lost. The lesser archangels are not the only ones that needed lessons on form. We all did. But the lesser archangels have had the most guilt about allowing themselves to feel the essence within the form, and have feared it was both judgmental and going against God's wishes to allow themselves to recognize unloving essence within a form that guilt has told them is loving. We left the lesser archangels in a state of confusion without realizing the full extent of what we had done to them, and we went on to the angels. Early attempts to help the angels. When we got the angels, we discovered that they were not sure anymore what orders they belonged in. They were even more mixed up than when I had tried to straighten them out earlier. They had guilt telling them that they had too much light compared to some of the other spirits I had manifested after them. They were afraid that they had held back light from these spirits in order to have it for themselves. They had original guilt telling them it was not even right to separate the light from the darkness at all. They were afraid that they had taken their light at the expense of everything else that looked darker than they did. The angels had emerged in a position that was almost manifested spirits, and yet they were not. They had the position of Godhead moving into manifestation, and they were unsure whether they were Godhead or manifested spirits. The angels were transition, and they were having trouble trying to be both Godhead and manifested spirits at the same time. I told them they needed to understand that they had both of these realities in them, but they were not really both. They were themselves, and they had emerged for a purpose which they could not fulfill if they were mixed up themselves. I could see more clearly in looking at them how they had gotten so mixed up. They had not understood who they were. They had a Godhead energy that needed to go forth into manifestation, and yet they were not manifested spirits themselves. They had a delicate balance to maintain and needed to know many things in order to handle it. They had desire to understand more about themselves now, but I felt I had to straighten their intermingling out first. Angels of the different orders had been merging together, and so had angels of different orders. In quite a few cases, the pieces that were mixed together, as though they were one being, were all insisting that they were the original piece, and it was the others that had to leave. Many of the pieces that were mixed together were not aligned enough to do anything other than squabble about how to proceed. The confusions Lucifer had given them were making matters even worse. I asked them to feel what parts seemed to be in their right places, so that we could help the other parts that were not at home to find their own right place. The angels said that Lucifer had told them it was wrong to feel, because it led to having preference for one thing over another. I saw then that what I perceived as squabbles among them, they wanted me to perceive as theoretical arguments. They wouldn't admit to actually having disagreements because guilt told them that disagreements meant they had preference. From the very beginning, the angels had secretly thought they were my favorites, and this had opened the door for guilt to tell them it was wrong to have preference for one thing over another. When Lucifer spoke what their own guilt had been telling them, they believed he was right, because he spoke what they were afraid to speak, and because his light looked so bright. The angels had equated brightness of light with God's presence, and have had this confusion for a long time. Most of the teachers on earth who have been angels have given this confusion to the ones they have taught. The ones who have this confusion need to realize now that loving presence is God's presence, no matter what form it takes. I had a job on my hands that was not an easy one to handle. The angels had many confusions that allowed them to get mixed up, and these same confusions were not allowing them to get straightened out. They had a desire for me to help them, but they were so confused about what was understanding and what was misunderstanding that they were unsure about what I was trying to do with them. They had the fear that Lucifer was right in some places and I was right in some places, and they were unsure just which was which. The angels had fear of being manifested at all, and many wanted to handle this fear by clinging together in a big ball. Many felt less afraid this way, and the ones that weren't less afraid were at least distracted from their fear by the confusion. They wanted to deny this fear and insist that as long as they had the same massive light, it didn't matter how it was arranged. Many of them feared that it was not right to be angels because it felt like a limitation that they had not foreseen. They had thought that having white light would mean that they were unlimited. And after the manifested spirits came forth and the angels began going out to them, it felt to the angels like they were limited to not having deeper colors and greater density the way the others did. The angels felt that their forms were not well enough to find, and that they were too filmy compared to the manifested spirits. They had begun to equate the filmy, white, and indefinite aspects of themselves with weakness. Many of them had begun to wish that they were manifested spirits instead of angels. The desire to change into something other than what they were had definitely played a role in the mixing together that they had done. I now saw that even had pieces of manifested spirits in them, and that they had left some pieces of themselves in the manifested spirits. The angels had guilt, anger, and fear that they did not want to accept here, and without accepting it, they could not accept how I felt about what they had done. They feared that I meant that they were not to have sexual relationships, which was what they perceived themselves to be doing when they merged together. They also had the feelings that they wanted to deny about having merged with some of the manifested spirits. They had shame now, and they were holding back a lot of frightened grief that they had done a wrong that could not be righted. They were afraid they had mixed themselves up in ways that could never be straightened out again. Considering how long it has taken the angels to get to the place where they can straighten themselves out, it certainly looked from this vantage point like it would be never. Many of the angels use the word never quite frequently when they are making judgments, and their emotions often feel like nothing will ever get better when they are upset. The angels have to understand that it is not possible to get past the problem if they won't admit to what the problem really is. The angels have hidden their problems for so long that many of them are going to have to do some digging to reconnect what is actually bothering them. The angels have fear as one of their main issues, and they have covered this fear with a lot of rationalizations and angry blame for others. The angels have rationalized their angry blame as justified, considering the inability of others to comprehend the complex and deep realities in which the angels' consciousness moves. The angels have to forgive themselves for judging against their fear, and for judging that they did not do well taking on the parental role with the manifested spirits, when they really feared they were still children themselves in a relationship with me. Denial is a problem with the angels. They have all wanted to insist that they were more my equal than anything else, and therefore they were never really children. They have a lot to learn now if they are finally ready to accept it. I have great love for the angels, and they need to understand that it is not wrong that they have harbored resentment toward me that needs to heal now. The attention I gave the angels at first was because they needed it, and because I was fascinated by what they had to offer. The angels then believed I favored them even over the mother. They had fear that this was not right in some way, and their fear opened the door to guilt. Their guilt then drew them punishment that seemed to be saying, God is not like any spirits to think they are his favorites, and the treatment you are going to receive now will let you know how wrong you have been, and will convince you that you are not God's favorites. The angels have held this judgment against themselves, and have had a very hard time with the punishment guilt gave them here. They have a lot of healing of pain to do. The angels had started on this path even then. I did not want to see them have to go down it, but I could not stop them no matter what I tried. The angels feared my inability to help meant I was not an adequate God, or that I was unloving, or that I really did not love them the way they wanted me to. Their anger and fear have both been denied, and the angels need to understand that it is not wrong to let these feelings move now. The angels have many feelings they have not let themselves know they have. Moving, what can be recognized in what I have already given will open the angels to connect to the rest of what I have to tell them later. There is so much information that is needed now that I have to give a little to everyone in each book, and not to dwell in any one order of spirits for so long. When you have really moved with what I am telling you now, you will get more. I have realized fully that what I give is the right amount at the right time. In the past, I had guilt that I was inadequate and could not provide the spirits with enough. I now know that spirits have some responsibility for themselves that I was not acknowledging then. The spirits have to understand more profoundly now than in the past also, or healing will be no more effective than past efforts have been. The quickness of spirits to assimilate information is not to be denied, but spirits desiring manifested existence must understand what that means. The spirit must find the ways to communicate this to the will that is so lost that it does not even know what you are reading now, and this must be done with love present. Lack of acceptance for the will's seeming slowness is not loving acceptance for its needs, but loving acceptance for the anger at the will must be given also. When your anger triggers you into fear, or triggers someone near you into fear, and the guilt is recognized in this pattern, you will be getting someplace because the lost will is very afraid of the spirit's anger toward it.